Archaeological discoveries in Jerusalem make the Bible come alive. Learn about the latest earth-shaking discovery in the Holy City and the significance it holds for every person on the planet. Next, on The Key of David with Gerald Flurry.
Greetings, everyone. Dr. Eilat Mazar has discovered many artifacts as she has been digging in Jerusalem for a number of years, and as one of the chief archaeologists of the world. She has uncovered David's palace, Solomon's wall, Nehemiah's wall, bullae or seals of two princes who were working and did have Jeremiah the prophet put in prison. And they even petitioned King Zedekiah to kill Jeremiah, but that did not happen, and of course God would not allow it. But these bullae are just clay seals that were used to seal important documents and messages by very important people, mainly in Judah. She has uncovered the Hezekiah bulla also, and she said that was the most, according to her belief anyhow, is her most extraordinary discovery of the seals, because it was so important in many ways. There never had been the seal of a Judean king even found in all of the archaeology of these many years. But she found it. Now she's discovered the Isaiah seal. And this is the most important one of all, I believe, and it stands out in a spectacular way. And because it ties into another seal. And it just stands out in a spectacular way, and it's one of the greatest lessons this world can ever learn, and they're never going to solve their problems unless they learn this lesson. It is really and truly significant, and one that we need to think about a great deal. We think Dr. Mazar has made the most significant discoveries for many years, really, and especially in Jerusalem. She has always said, we must let the stones speak. Let the stones speak. So that's what we try to do and what we're going to do today. And I want to play a short video for you, narrated by my son, and explaining what the Isaiah bullae or seal is all about.
In December 2015, Jerusalem archaeologist Eilat Mazar announced the discovery of an ancient clay seal, or bulla. The bulla contained an astonishing inscription. It read, "Belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah." This tiny artifact carried a sensational message. This seal proved the existence of one of ancient Judah's greatest kings, and prove the accuracy of the biblical record. Dr. Mazar didn't know it at the time, but another bulla bearing an intriguing inscription was waiting to be placed under her microscope. The Old Testament record shows that King Hezekiah was a contemporary of Isaiah the prophet. The biblical books of Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah show that this prophet played a central role in Hezekiah's remarkable reign over Judah. Today we have indisputable scientific evidence proving the existence of King Hezekiah. But what about Hezekiah's chief counselor and one of the Bible's greatest prophets? Is there archaeological evidence proving the existence of the prophet Isaiah?
Now, the bulla of King Hezekiah was part of a assemblage. It didn't come by itself. First, we published King Hezekiah's bulla. That was the first thing. But then we studied the whole assemblage. And the whole assemblage contains more than 30 bullae. And one of them attracted our special attention. We were very skeptic at the very beginning. We didn't jump on the idea. It says LeYeshayahu. Okay, fine. This is quite a common name. And then it says Nun Bet Yud Navi, which is in Hebrew, if you just listen to that, Navi, it's a prophet. So, wow, Yeshayahu the prophet. This is, and then you have something nearby, which is Chizkiyahu, King Hezekiah, near the prophet Yeshayahu. What fantastic. But then we needed to study it very carefully.
The Isaiah Bulla was uncovered in 2009 during a small archaeological excavation on the Ophel. The Ophel area is located adjacent south of the Temple Mount and has furnished numerous important artifacts since it first began to be excavated in 1968. The Isaiah Bulla was discovered in an area adjacent to what archaeological evidence suggests was a royal bakery from the First Temple period.
The debris that we were excavating is just below us. So where King Hezekiah Bulla was found, just below here, where Brent is standing, and then the whole assemblage was spreading all over. So we first published this one, and then worked on the other Bulla just as well as on figurines and other important items. And just on the other side of this, the same assemblage, just on the other side of that Herodian wall that was disturbing that assemblage in its middle, that we found another Bulla that is of Isaiah.
The Bulla is small and can be divided into 3 zones or lines. The challenge when studying the Isaiah seal is that part of the Bulla is missing and part is damaged. The damage was caused by a finger pressing against the soft clay when the seal was first created almost 2,700 years ago. You can still see the fingerprints. The fact that part of the seal is missing does not affect its interpretation. This is because the missing section is inscribed with an image or motif and not text. Dr. Mazar believes it was the image of a grazing doe, symbolizing prosperity. The text on the second line reads, Yeshayahu. Although one letter is missing, there is only one viable option for the identity of the missing letter. It can only be the Hebrew letter Vav. So the text on the second line is indisputable. It reads, Yeshayahu. This is the Hebrew word for Isaiah. But is this Isaiah the prophet? The text on the third line is incomplete due to the damage sustained to the Bulla's left side. 3 letters can be deciphered, however, and together they read, Navi. Archaeologist Reut Ben Aryeh has studied the Bulla and explains why the missing letter is most likely an aleph, making the second word Navi, or prophet.
Among all the bullae from the excavation in the Ophel, we found this one. In its middle field, there was the name Yeshaya. So it was very exciting to read in its lower field the letters Nun Bet Yud, which suggest the word Navi, prophet. But there were 2 problems with this suggestion. First, the word Navi is usually written with the letter Aleph in the end. Second, most of the time in biblical Hebrew, titles after private names appear with a definite article, the, and we don't have that in our Bulla. So it was more reasonable to say that it is a private name, Novi or Novai, that is known from the Bible and also from epigraphic findings. But by examining the Bulla, I noticed that the borderline is seen only on its right edge and not on the left edge, which means the impression is not complete. If we continue the borderline, we can see that there is a space for 2 more letters in the middle register and for 1 letter in the lower one. Usually there is no empty space in the seal, so it makes sense to insert the letters Vav, Hey, and Aleph, and to suggest that this Bulla was impressed by the seal of Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah the prophet.
While the presence of an aleph is possible and even likely, There are other interpretations. Professor Shmuel Achituv is an expert epigraphist and suggests Navi could refer to a place or surname.
It belonged to Isaiah, but that's all. Because it says Navi, Nun Bet Yod, which means Navi, but it lacks the Aleph. Perhaps Navi is to be pronounced Novi, Novai, or something else. Then that's a citizen or town of Nov. But of course, it can't be Navi, prophet. As I said, the lack of the Aleph. When we, in modern Hebrew, maybe pronounce the name Navi, you don't feel, you don't hear the Aleph, but it was felt, it was pronounced.
Although there are other explanations, the weight of evidence strongly indicates that this is the seal impression of Isaiah the prophet. Consider, first, it is indisputable that this seal is inscribed with the Hebrew name for Isaiah. While this name was undoubtedly common in ancient Judah, it is rare for an individual to have his own private seal. Only important officials or royalty bore their own private seal, so whoever this Isaiah was, he was important. Second, the position of the text in relation to the outer edge of the bulla suggests that there is space in which added lettering would almost certainly have existed. Third, consider too that there are only 3 potential options for the identity of the missing letter in Navi. The most logical and the most natural explanation is that it was an aleph. With an aleph, the word Navi means prophet. Fourth, and most importantly, consider the archaeological context in which this bulla was uncovered. The Isaiah bulla was uncovered at the same time as the Hezekiah bulla, in the same location, in the same assemblage, and in exactly the same strata of soil. Finally, consider what the biblical record says about the relationship between King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah. 2 Kings 18 and verse 5 says that Hezekiah was Judah's greatest king, second only to King David. But the books of Kings, Chronicles, and Isaiah also reveal that the key to King Hezekiah's success was his remarkable relationship with the prophet Isaiah. There are 15 occasions in the Bible where the names Hezekiah and Isaiah are mentioned in the same verse. Whenever King Hezekiah faced a crisis or needed counsel, he turned to the prophet Isaiah, and the prophet, inspired by God, guided King Hezekiah and all of Judah through the crisis. This was one of the most remarkable king-prophet relationships in the Bible. When you consider this seal impression in the context of biblical history, how likely is it that a seal impression discovered within a few feet of the Hezekiah bulla and inscribed with the name Isaiah belonged to a man other than Isaiah the prophet?
If you'll notice 2 Kings 19 and verse 1, it talks about King Hezekiah knew that he had to have connections with God. And then in verse 5 of 2 Kings 18, it talks about he restored obedience to Judah and obedience to God. And he cleaned out the temple and really was a great king. And the Bible calls him and labels him the greatest king after King David. So it is quite an accomplishment when you can find a bulla or one of his own seals that he touched and undoubtedly and used personally. That's quite a significant find. So everything then became oriented around the temple after he had made all these corrections. Here's an interesting fact. Dr. Mazar uncovered the seal of Isaiah and Hezekiah at the same time. It's just that she didn't find out. She has to sift through all of these artifacts, and she didn't find out until quite a few years later about the Isaiah seal, the Isaiah bulla. Here's what we wrote in a recent article. This is an article that we have that's on our website by Brad McDonald. And here's what it says. When you consider the various explanations and the probability of each, it is hard to imagine this seal belonging to anyone other than Isaiah the prophet. The, quote, chances of it belonging to any other but the known prophet Isaiah are extremely slim, Dr. Mazar says. And I'll just read another little quote. When studying the archaeological context of a specific artifact, it is also important to consider the overall storyline or narrative of the artifacts or ruins around it. If the assemblage is reasonably homogeneous, meaning the artifacts all date to the same period, then together they will often tell a story. Depending on what is uncovered, the assemblage can provide a glimpse into the political, cultural, or religious environment of the time. If the archaeological context in which an artifact is uncovered has a distinct theme, then it is likely that the artifact in question was part of that history. Now here's the thing that's important to us is every time that Hezekiah went to the prophet Isaiah, then the most important person in the nation was Isaiah, because his view coming from God was given to Hezekiah, and Hezekiah did that repeatedly. He repeatedly went to Isaiah. That's why he was such an outstanding king and so like King David, because he made sure he knew what God was thinking and what God wanted him to do. Now that is a very, very critical point. I want to read to you a fascinating verse that really is prophecy for today, right out of one of the Psalms. Notice this. In Psalm 102, and we'll begin in verse 13. You shall arise and have mercy upon Zion, for the time to favor her. Yea, the set time is come. A time to favor Zion, talking about all Israel and really a lot more. But it's a prophecy for this end time. And it says now that he's talking about when that time comes. Now, today, this end time. Verse 14, for your servants take pleasure in her stones and favor the dust thereof. Here, this is talking about archaeology, digging in the stones and in the dust. And that's going on leading up to the coming of the Messiah. Verse 15, so the heathen shall fear the name of the Eternal, and all the kings of the earth your glory. When the Eternal shall build up Zion, he shall appear in his glory. He's talking about that time right now. See, we're digging in the stones and the dust. And Dr. Mazar likes to say, let the stones speak. Let them speak. And when you do that, the Bible comes alive, and prophecy comes alive, and God comes alive. And it's an amazing process that should happen in every person's life, but does not. But notice verse 19, for he has looked down from the height of his sanctuary, from heaven did the Eternal behold the earth, to hear the groaning of the prisoner, to loose those that are appointed to death, to declare the name of the Eternal in Zion, and his praise in Jerusalem. See, that's where the dig is, in Jerusalem. And it goes on in verse 22 and says, when the people are gathered together in the kingdoms to serve the Eternal. This is when all the nations are gathered around Jerusalem to be led by Jesus Christ sitting on David's throne. And we'll have those great kings like David and Hezekiah. They'll be there, and they're going to be there very shortly. That's what God promises. But this is all in an end-time setting. And it's about a dig in Jerusalem leading up to the coming of the Messiah. I mean, this is talking about this very time that we're living in today. If you can't put these two together, that is doing the digging and finding the artifacts at just before the Messiah comes. That's significant, and that tells us a lot. The digs lead right into the coming of the Messiah. I just want to mention about 4 points here that you need to remember. Number one, the Hezekiah Bulla and the Isaiah Bulla were recovered in the same assemblage. The same assemblage. That's critical. Number two, it was exactly in the same strata of soil. Exactly in the same strata of soil, just a few feet away. Number three, there are 15 Bible verses where King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah are mentioned together. 15 verses in the Old Testament where Isaiah and Hezekiah are mentioned together in these verses. Or as Dr. Mazar said, in the same breath. They're tied together. Why is that so critical? Well, we'll see. I mean, it's one of the most remarkable king-prophets relationships in the entire Bible. It probably would just be right up there at the very top. And that is what is critical for any king or president. If they would just do this and go to God's prophet and get direction from God through the man he's using, and those men under him who are speaking for God and telling people and directing people how to live God's way of life, then they're going to have a spectacular success like Hezekiah did. And what a future he has, sharing David's throne with the Messiah. Again, that's why the Isaiah Bulla is so important beyond other bullae or seals, is because the big lesson here is that these two seals are tied together. The king and the prophet were of one mind, because they let God be the mind that guided them. And they had spectacular success. They had incredible success because of that truth. Now here, if you want real hope, I mean, here is the hope of the Bible. People are going to suffer and suffer and suffer until they understand this hope and turn to God. That's what it amounts to. This is what we must understand. The Isaiah seal just stands out in that way, and I'll tell you, it goes on to just show you what it is really rare when somebody had their own seal, or because important people had them. But you can go on and read Isaiah 40 where it says that behold your God, and that message has to go out to Jerusalem in this very end time. And the message of those seals and all those artifacts have to go out as well. Until next week, this is Gerald Flurry. Goodbye, friends.
Request a digital copy of this Key of David program. You will also receive the special archaeology issue of the Philadelphia Trumpet News Magazine and Gerald Flurry's book, Isaiah's End Time Vision. All our materials are available free of charge, at no cost or obligation to you. Order now.